displaying the glory of God's creation by visiting every state park, national park, and national forest in the contiguous 48 states. Welcome to Parking Full Time with Big Dave the Parker. First hole, 290 feet. It's a par 3. It plays gradually downhill, but it's a very open hole. There are these cedar trees off to the right, and they will gobble up your disc if you miss over there. I want to welcome you back to Parking Full Time. I am Big Dave the Parker. We are at Grand Central Station Disc Golf Course. We are a few miles east of Clemson, South Carolina, so we are in upstate South Carolina. There's the first basket right there. And there's the view back to the tee from behind the first basket. Second hole, 580 feet, par 4. This hole starts out rather wide open, but we are heading into a narrow gap in the woods straight ahead. This course is organized into two 18-hole routes called lines. There is the freight line, which I did in a separate series of Walkabout videos, and then the Locomotive Line, which is featured in this video. In total, there are 27 distinct tee pads and 25 distinct baskets, and so some tee pads and baskets are used on both lines, and some holes are played on both lines. For example, this hole is the second hole on the Locomotive Line. It is also the 11th hole on the freight line. It's the same hole, it just appears at a different point in the sequence depending on which line that you're playing. Overall, the Locomotive Line is a little bit longer and harder than the freight line, although there are some cases where that's not true. There are some holes where that's not true. That's the second basket you see up ahead. Again, it gets rather tight once you get into the woods here. There's the view back to the tee from behind the basket. Third hole. This hole plays partway back up the hill that the second hole came down. It is heavily wooded, but there's a pretty wide fairway here. It's 235 feet. It is a par 3. The basket is off to the left here, and you can see that there's one tree with many low branches right in front of the basket, so you want to bring your disc in from the right here. There is the view back to the tee from behind the third basket. The fourth hole is kind of the inverse of the previous hole. It is 260 feet. It is a par 3. It's also a slight dogleg right, but again there's dense woods on either side of the fairway here. And if you throw your disc into those woods, you can probably find your disc, but the woods are dense enough that you're going to have a really tough recovery shot to get back out into the fairway and to advance your disc towards the basket. There's the fourth basket right there. Again, the area around the basket is very open, so a good throw should set up a birdie opportunity on this hole. Fifth hole is the famous or infamous island hole. It plays down a steep hill here, and that's why I'm being very careful about where I walk here. It is 180 feet. It is a par 3. The idea on this island hole is everything inside the circle of rocks, the mulched area up ahead, that's the island. Everything out of that is out of bounds. The good news is the drop zone is right up here by the edge of the rocks, and so even if you miss the island with your first throw, you still have a decent chance to make par. Hole number 6 plays into the northeast corner of the park. There was a new tee pad being constructed that we just passed there. This hole is 250 feet. It's a par 3. It plays through a lightly wooded area that you see here. There's a creek off to the right, although it would take a pretty bad throw or a bad ricochet off of a tree in order to find the creek off to the right. Not one of the more interesting holes on this course, to be honest with you. There's the view back to the tee. 7th hole is 355 feet, and it continues the eastward course of the previous hole, but now we are in a sewer line clearing over to the right-hand side of the creek, so the previous hole is off to the left here. This hole is interesting because the basket that you can see coming up here on the left, it's actually in a little peninsula out in the creek, and so it's kind of surrounded by the creek on 3 sides. The creek is out of bounds, and it is definitely in play on this hole. It's a fairly open hole, and kind of long for a par 3. Again, 355 feet par 3, but possibly my favorite hole on this course. There's the view back to the tee. Hole number 8. It's 740 feet. It is a par 5, and it is steeply uphill. Now, the odd thing about this hole, the natural way to route this hole would be through the power line clearing off to the left, but that is not the way this hole is routed. This hole is actually routed through this somewhat narrow gap in the trees over here to the right. And there are a couple of mandos that force you to play through this narrow gap in the trees and not up through the power line clearing. I find this hole a little bit contrived. Honestly, this isn't one of my favorite holes on this course. But people who are more skilled at maneuvering their disc than I tend to like this kind of hole, and in general tend to like this Locomotive Line course a little bit better than I do. You see, we're curving around to the right here. In fact, we are headed right back for the power line clearing that we started on. One more thing about the 2 lines here. The 2 lines are color-coded. The Locomotive Line is color-coded blue, and the Freight Line is color-coded black. So if you've seen some numbers on these baskets that are blue or black, that's what that refers to. In general, I found that this course had very good signage, and I had no trouble following either of the 2 lines when I came here. That is the 8th basket that you see up ahead. Again, right under one of the power lines. And there's the view back to the tee. Not my favorite hole, but some people like it more than I do. 9th hole, and of course final hole on the front 9. It is only 200 feet, but as you can see, it is a very tight line through this really dense grove of pine trees. It is a par 3. Since this is the last hole on the front 9, I want to thank you for watching. Parking full-time would not be anything without the people who watch. I realize that every day, and I thank you every day. There's the 9th basket, and the view back through that really tight line back to the 9th tee. That's the end of the front 9. I will see you on the back 9.